So welcome aboard back for session 2, everyone. I know there were also some people that are joining us for session 2 and maybe weren't available for session 1. So we welcome you to this SEL Roadshow brought to you by both Partnership for Children and Youth and CASEL, and hosted by Imperial County Office of Education and San Bernardino Superintendents of Schools. Thank you again for spending some of your super valuable time with us. I want to just acknowledge the times that we're in and the stress that you're under. And I invite you to just sit up in your chair, start taking a few deep breaths and letting them out in order to get yourself ready for learning. We have used that spreadsheet to pre-assign rooms. So even if you don't see your name, it's going to be easy for us once we get there to get you into your team. But we think we've got most of it right. And keep dropping us some information in the chat. And John is taking a look, and so am I. And we'll get that all taken care of. But before we get too far rolling into the morning, I want to pass it along to our San Bernardino partner, Whitney Verde.
Thanks, Kiana, so much. My name is Whitney Verde. I'm the coordinator for prevention and intervention at San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. And we are thrilled to be co-host of this event. Welcome everybody to session 2. This is such a powerful topic, and we are all, I know everybody on this team is so passionate about it. So I am very pleased to introduce my superintendent today, Mr. Ted Alejandre, and he will be kicking us off and doing some opening remarks. So, Mr. Alejandre, are you on?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Whitney. And it's great to be here this morning with everybody that's participating in this very important roadshow. And I can't tell you, and as you know, how important it is to support the social emotional needs of students and adults. You know, it wasn't too long ago that we worked with Cal State and our County of San Bernardino and really solidifying our cradle to career roadmap for all of our students that really focus on those key indicators of success, looking at 0 to 5, K-12 and post-secondary, not just from an academic standpoint, but also from a social emotional standpoint. And we know how important those indicators are, because if the students don't have the support they need to excel in social emotional needs, then they're not going to be ready to accelerate in academics. And we hear that all the time. And as we've worked with our school districts in performing our responsibility and local control accountability plan approval, you know, we've really become intimately involved and aware of what the priorities of school districts are, and where we see, especially with high needs students, socioeconomically disadvantaged, foster youth, homeless, and others, we see so much support given in the social emotional environment. And that is so important to move forward with, and as much as we can to support all the needs that students have. And with individuals like yourselves that are there on the front lines, providing that guidance, that expertise, and that support, that's what really makes it helpful so districts can really be strategic and effective as they work with partners in this collaborative, collective impact environment to really leverage resources to best support students. But I can't tell you how important this work is, and I'm just so happy to be part of it. Love working with Todd Fennell out in Imperial County. I know how passionate this is to him as well. And together with the support of all of you and our partners, we can really make a difference, a positive difference in the efforts that we have going forward. So thank you so much again. Hope this presentation goes well today. I know it will. And as you continue to get this information, thank you for everything you do to make sure things go incredibly well for our students in the classrooms and the environments and the communities that we serve. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. As we know, this work is both grassroots from the classroom all the way up to the boardroom. And that's why we're spending day 2 on adult social and emotional learning, because Stephanie Jones reminds us we really can't do this work for our students unless we're also have those skills ourselves. So that's what today is about. Thank you so much for everyone who gave us feedback on day 1. We had some appreciations about the information, being in breakouts with new colleagues, actually practicing the 3 signature SEL practices, and then doing a deeper dive into 10 indicators of SEL in schools. What does it actually look like? And that terrific video from Nashville. Needs and requests. Big request for more time in your own teams. So that's why we're asking you to rename yourself using the breakout number, and you can find that on your participant list. You're asking for more specific tools, and that's again what today will be providing you. Another break would be helpful. We really heard that. So we're actually going to take a longer break in the middle. We'll have a 10-minute break and start and end on time. We started on time and we will end on time. So we're glad that's to hear from you. And we hope again that you'll give us feedback, because we do really take it to heart and change up as we go. Just to remind you, on day 1 was really an overview day. It was a view from the balcony. We looked at what social emotional learning is, some misconceptions. Where do you begin this work? It's so comprehensive. We know we have to begin with ourselves, and we use some tools and resources just a little bit that are in the roadmap.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
My goodness. I don't know why that's happening. Too much technology. This is about going down on the dance floor, if you will, staying with that metaphor. We're going to look at a framework for adult social emotional learning. We all know it's important, but how do you get your hands around it so you can actually engage in practices and set up experiences so we can get better at it? We're going to look at social emotional learning, particularly the adult role in reopening schools 2020, which is unlike any other reopening that we've ever had, and practical tools and applications that get us there and support us. Our flow for today, we'll have a warm welcome. We'll take a look at a framework for understanding adult SEL, look at the SEL Roadmap, and then dig in with our teams on a critical practice in the roadmap, which is caring for our staff. So the adult SEL piece, everyone's working in a completely new environment. How do we care for one another? And if we're in leadership, how do we set up systems and structures, again, using the resources that are in the roadmap? And a couple of really good chunks of team time for you to be working with your colleagues. If you're here on your own, you'll be working with colleagues from the region. So you will be working together. Jennifer.
Good morning, everyone. So this should look a little familiar from last time, but I'm going to cover a few logistics for today. A reminder that the camera should stay on when you want to be part of community. And I'm really pleased to be able to be seen in addition to being heard today. I had some real connection issues last time we all met, so I'm happy to be back with you fully. We gave you the instruction about renaming yourself, and continue to put your questions or issues in chat if you are still having an issue with that. We are using the chat for questions, some areas of content, or if you have tech issues, please use that. We have several of us who are going to be monitoring that throughout the session. A reminder about our breakouts to make sure you remember the concept of equity of voice. So just be sure you're keeping track of time and make sure everybody has a chance to share. And also a reminder that all of the resources that we're going to be going over today will be put in the folder that everybody has access to. And then in the second half of the session, we're going to have some more team time for folks, which is why we're going through all of this work to break everybody into the right groups so that you can have plenty of time with your teams to be discussing what we're reviewing today. And I just saw a question in the chat about the folder. There was a folder that was shared with participants after session 1, and we'll be sharing it again after session 2, which includes all of the materials from all of the sessions. Next slide. So we looked at this last time, and again, this is the Art of Conversation Behaviors from the National Equity Project, which we're using instead of some of your more common ground rules or ways of working together. And it's a really valuable guide for how to have productive dialogue with one another throughout the session. And I'm just going to read through these briefly. We acknowledge one another as equals. Be curious about each other. We recognize that we need each other's help to become better listeners. We slow down so we have time to think and reflect. We remember that conversation is a natural way that humans think together, and we expect it to be messy at times. So, important things to remember. This is a quote that we really love to help set the stage for our work together on adult social emotional learning. And Margaret Wheatley is a very wise woman who studies organizations and teams and individuals and how they engage in the change process. And given this particular moment in time, this is really very poignant and applicable to where we are. And I'm going to read this, and then we're going to go into some discussion in trios. It is possible to prepare for the future without knowing what it will be. The primary way to prepare for the unknown is to attend to the quality of our relationships, to how well we know and trust one another. And this is going to really be a big theme of what we're together today. So we want you to think of someone that you trust, and what did it take to develop and maintain trust with that person? So think about that for a moment, and we're going to break you into trios, and these are going to be random, for about 5 minutes, and share what you're thinking about and the person that is on your mind that you have developed trust with, and how you built that trust and maintained that trust. So we're going to break you into trios, and we'll bring you back in 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to open all the rooms. See you guys in 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody had some good conversations. And so still thinking about that one person that you talked about in your breakouts, person that you trust, we want you to think about one word that contributes to building and sustaining trust. And we're going to build a word cloud with our words. So there's going to be a link that shows up in the chat. It's there now. And we want you to open up that link and type in your word. And we're going to shift over and be able to see this word cloud in a moment as it's coming together, and then we'll reflect on it in a moment. So go ahead into the link, type in your one word.
Are you able to see it?
Yep.
Awesome.
Honesty is a big one so far. Communication, vulnerability, time, very, very important. Consistency, grace, respect, non-judgmental, loyalty, reliability, being present, intentional, accountability, love, There are some great words that are coming in here. Thank you, everybody, for doing this. And we just want to take a moment and think about all of the SEL skills that we practice when we are building trust with others. So a really important thing to be thinking about as we're moving forward our work on adult social emotional learning. So thank you for going through that exercise. And I will turn it back to Mary.
Great, and we're gonna switch sharing. Yeah. When Castle first started bringing social emotional learning to districts, we would arrive and districts would say, we really aren't interested in adult SEL. The urgency of our students' needs is so great that we're really going to jump over that piece because we really want programs in classrooms and we want kids to be engaged with social emotional learning right away. And lo and behold, we discovered very quickly that the adults were central to any successful school experience for our students, of course. And so we began an exploration and a development of a, of a framework of how do you focus on adult social emotional learning. And we discovered that there are really three elements to adult SEL. And the first one is learn. And you think, well, oh yeah, I can learn about SEL. This is actually learning about ourselves. It's our own self-awareness. It's our own self-management. It's our own understanding our competencies, our biases. If we recall last time we were together, we did an SEL self-assessment, which is really a continual process of learning about ourselves. Next in adult SEL is around collaboration. And we all know that just putting people in a room together and telling them to work together is not enough. There needs to be more intentionality, support, scaffolding, skill building, if you will, around working together and collaborating. So people often think that because we're adults and we're successful, that we have this skill of collaboration. But it really requires a lot of social emotional work to collaborate successfully. And I noticed that in your Wordle, how often communication was coming up. So that piece around communication and collaborating are really essential. And finally, around modeling social emotional learning. And we can be in schools where there's a great social emotional learning program, there are plenty of resources available, but the staff are not treating each other well. And believe me, students really pay attention to what they're seeing the adults doing. They can listen to what we say, they kind of can take it in or not, but really they're watching how we behave towards one another and towards them. And that's true literally from the superintendent and the school board all the way to cafeteria workers, bus drivers. Kids really are making that assessment the whole time. So it's around learn, collaborate, and model. But what does that look like? Woo, great. This is a good reminder for me. We've been at this 20 minutes. So we're going to take a 20-second look away from our screens. So starting now, and I know I have a timer, Erica, 20 seconds, look away from our screen, 20 feet away if we can.
time.
Thank you so much. It's so tempting to look at our screens during that period to catch up with what's going on, but we're not. So this piece around what does SEL look like in action when they're doing, we're going to look at a little video that Castle, we didn't make it, but we supported the making of it. And while you're looking at it, look for examples of staff learning about themselves. What's going on where there's moments when staff is able to reflect and do some self-assessment, self-learning? When are they able to collaborate in ways that really foster trust? Not just getting together in a room, but what's in place, systems and structures that really foster that trust, that communication. And finally, where are there examples of staff modeling these competencies, these mindsets throughout the school community? So as you're watching this video, you might want to take notes to yourself, because you will be debriefing the video with colleagues around where you saw specific evidence of self-learning, collaborating, and modeling. Okay, take a look. Oh, no, it'll go back.
Social emotional learning supports both children and adults. An effective approach to school-wide SEL provides regular opportunities for staff to cultivate their own social, emotional, and cultural competence, and to develop a sense of community.
When we think about adult SEL, we're talking about the adult's own social and emotional and cultural competence. Do they have opportunities to reflect on their own self-awareness, their own bias, their own identity, their own thoughts and feelings and understanding of who they are and how they fit in? And we're also thinking about opportunities that they have to reflect and build skills for stress management, for relationship skills.
At the Facing History New Tech High School, all educators attend training on social emotional learning.
As adults, we went through training, so you will hear teachers say, I have to have a restorative conversation with Miss So-and-so because we had words, or we're not getting along or something like that. So it's modeling it with each other. So when you're doing it with the students, it's more natural, it's more organic. The other piece too is kids see when adults aren't getting along.
Some of the research has really shown us that when teachers have positive social and emotional competencies, they're more likely to be able to manage their stressors in the classroom context. They are able to provide more student choice and voice and opportunity within the classroom context. They are better classroom managers. They are actually able to manage their own stress broadly, right? So they're less likely to burn out, which has huge implications for teacher well-being, for teacher shortages and reductions and the like. So teacher SEL not only affects their students, but also has a broader context.
Principal Mark Ingoglia tried a new approach to modeling collaboration for students. He moved all the teachers' desks into one teacher workroom. This expanded the opportunities for the teachers to collaborate with one another and practice the same relationship building skills they tried to promote with students.
We have a teacher room where all their desks are. Sure, one teacher only teaches in one room, but when they're not teaching, they're in that teacher workroom. We do our best to have teams of teachers off at the same time. They all have the exact same 80 freshmen, so they're able to collaborate every day if they want. If you're sitting in a room and something's bothering you or you need help or something, you're going to have somebody in the room.
At the district level, Cleveland's Humanware Social Emotional Learning Department supports SEL in the schools. Their meetings begin with stress management exercises like breathing, centering themselves, and welcoming one another.
I've adapted our Humanware Executive Committee meetings that we have once a month. We now sit in a circle. So we're modeling that good circle behavior. Everyone has a voice in those meetings for sharing and bringing up issues of concern. Several years ago, we adopted what's called Communicate with Heart from the Cleveland Clinic. It was their customer experience program. And once it came to us, I kind of moved that to customer and colleague experience. Every staff member in our district is trained in Communicate with Heart. So it is a way to approach people when you meet them for the first time, and a way to approach people when there's a problem between them that needs to be worked through.
Unrelenting stress can lead to teacher burnout. When staff are engaged in working together around shared problems of practice and providing feedback with one another, they are better equipped to support learning outcomes. One way to support one another is through notes, bulletin boards, and positive talk in staff lounges.
If staff does not have a voice, it can be very depressing, it can be defeating and deflating. And I never want them to go through that, okay? I never want anybody to not feel positive about what they're doing. Being a building principal, it's fantastic, but you know what? Whether I'm talking to somebody that might work in the cafeteria, a crossing guard, somebody in the office, somebody that's in a classroom, instructional support, classroom teachers, we are all here together, okay? So we want to make sure we support each other. So I'm really big on building a solid school culture. And if somebody's down and out, what can we do to help?
This is not, I just want to do a caveat that social emotional learning isn't a panacea. It's just a way to remind ourselves of what's important to pay attention to, and that we're not going to leave something to chance. So that's really what this is. So we're going to break in trios now and take a look at what you saw, what stood out for you, what was being said or done that shows adults learning about their own mindsets, emotional states. Where were there opportunities for adults working together and creating a learning community? And where did you see adults modeling? Also look with what's already going on in your own sites as well. And we'll have 5 minutes for this breakout as well, John.
Okay.
And these are random. They're not in your teams yet.
Okay, here we go. See you in 5 minutes.
Time.
I am back, Erica. That is a no joke.
Is everybody awake now?
We are definitely back and ready to go. So thank you. Back in March, when it was clear that school was changing, the landscape was changing, Castle brought together 40 different organizations to first begin to have a conversation of how we could support schools with reopening, with really SEL strategies that were centered on relationships and built on the existing strengths of the school. So not to bring in something completely new, but to really build on what was already present, with knowing the importance of relationships with students, with adults, with families. This was going to be a very different scenario. So these 40 organizations worked together all summer, and we created a roadmap. And just like any roadmap that you would have in the old days anyway, a paper roadmap, you would look and it gives you an overview of what your different options are. So it's not a checklist or a prescription or necessarily even a recipe, but it's a roadmap for you to consider what your options are. So we're going to spend a few minutes looking at how the roadmap is structured, what's in it, the resources. You have an opportunity to dig into a particular area and then meet with your team after break to figure out what is our priority in particularly the adult SEL area, what are we already doing, and what options might be there for ourselves on this. So we're going to look at a video, and it's a video about the roadmap, but it's also how some castle districts are already using the roadmap. So you can see how it's being implemented.
We know that the school year will look different across the country, but whether schools will be in person, virtual, or a hybrid approach, the learning experience will be shaped not just by the pandemic, but also by the complex and layered impacts of racial injustice, economic inequities, grief, stress, and trauma.
So as we think about the sort of layered challenges that Melissa just laid out, we know that SEL is not a panacea, but we do understand that SEL is critical to building the skills and the collective problem solving that we need to be able to move towards collective well-being together. So what does the SEL roadmap look like? We have 4 critical SEL practices that we will be talking about today. First critical practice is really about that relationship building, about building a broad coalition of people that are committed to putting SEL at the center of our work to start a new school year.
So we're really feeling very optimistic about the way this tool can help us really structure our practices in how do we reach out and how do we get the voices of everyone on board. And I know that we did send out surveys at the district level to teachers, to families, and to students. And feedback we got from students was so helpful in us, on our team, being able to organize and plan for some reopening activities, because we took those kids' voices into account fully as we tried to figure out what do they need and how are we going to help them feel safe.
That's such a good segue into that second critical practice, which is about adults, right? And this is something we've learned from our partnership with districts and states, that if we want adults to create equitable learning environments and social emotional learning for students, we've got to help create the connection and the healing for our adults themselves so that they can then carry that to our young people.
We knew that adults were going to moving into something that was new, and we thought it was critically important that the leadership felt supported. So the way we structured it is that all principals had our partners, our restorative practices partners, and they, on a weekly basis, provided that healing space and healing circle for our principals to log on. What we learned here in this experience, the power of experiencing, the power of having those who are truly versed in creating the circles, versed in asking the questions, versed in creating that safe space. It was important for principals to experience it first. When you experience something, you then can go a little deeper, right? It starts to change how you think. It starts to change how you feel.
Thank you, Katia. That's great. And so the third critical practice is about what are we doing for students? And this includes both the types of equitable learning environments that we are building with intentionality, as well as the way we are weaving together social, emotional, and academic competency development.
We're looking at, I'm really excited about this project, a check-in that students would complete on a daily basis, and it measures their social emotional health, if you will, through 6 dimensions. And so particularly in secondary, where students don't communicate a whole lot about what their needs are, we're able to check their status over time. And if we see that a student is reporting that they are feeling down, sad, angry, frustrated, we can set different benchmarks, then that will allow us to respond and provide some timely intervention, as opposed to sometimes you go weeks before we can identify a sign, because especially in secondary, they go from teacher to teacher to teacher. So this will allow us to put, some type of, to be able to quantify that, if you will, to some degree, to identify the students that we need to provide that targeted support for in a more timely fashion.
Thank you so much, Ray. And then finally, Critical Practice 4 really asks us to think a little bit differently about data. How do we look at data as a way to build relationships, as a way to share power, and to really tap in more deeply to the voices of our young people and of our parents and of our teachers and staff in true partnership with one another?
I really want to lean into just the informal check-ins and data, and just bring to everyone's attention within the roadmap, they talk about just teacher check-ins and wellness check-ins for teachers. So often we are used to just doing the formal observations. Did you teach this? Are you on track with the scope and sequence? How are you doing right now? What are you doing for self this week? How are you balancing?
What Katia just said is a wonderful example of the leadership's responsibility to model what they want to see in their staff and what they want their staff to look for in their students.
Our kids, I think, are in dire need of emotional safety. Our teachers, our principals, our community in general. And so I really think that SEL is a bridge to getting to that destination where we can start getting on that path to emotional healing and providing really a deep, rich, and holistic education for our students.
We don't see the roadmap as just something for this moment, for these next few weeks. We really see it as something that will help propel you into an effective school year and beyond, in which SEL is part of that process throughout.
So as you can see, the roadmap is really centered around relationships and the importance of relationships. So Critical Practice 1 is about building new partnerships with families, with community. Critical Practice 2 is focused on the adults that typically would be in a building and how we can provide opportunities to connect, heal, and build their capacity. With students, it's really around the relationship we have with our students. Are they cared for? They need to feel cared for before they can engage. So what kind of learning environments are we providing? And finally, Critical Practice 4 is a new way of really thinking about data as a way to deepen relationships and power with families, students, and staff that typically we sharing data with. Today, we're going to do a deeper dive into Critical Practice 2 after we take a quick screen break.
Mary, a couple of folks have put in the chat they're having a little trouble hearing you.
Ah. Well, let me see. I can do, let me plug in my earplugs and see if I can do it that way. So Critical Practice 2, again, is really focusing on the adults that we're in contact with and that typically would be in a school building. And as Karen Von Osdale mentioned in the video, this isn't just about 1 month or 2 months or getting us through December, but it's really thinking about how do we design a school year in this new environment where we're attending to these important relationships. So let me plug in and do it this way. Hopefully this will be better for folks. If you could let folks know in chat if that's a better audio for you.
It sounds much better, thank you.
Okay, good. We're going to, again, look at this Critical Practice 2, and I invite you to read the 4 activities that we're suggesting are the most important. And when you read them, allowing space for connection and healing, ensuring access to mental health and trauma support, identify opportunities for innovation and anti-racist practices, and providing embedded professional learning. So read through this and think about which one is your priority, your most immediate priority. All of them are important, but which one would you say right now in this moment, this is the priority that I think our team really needs to pay attention to? And we're going to take a poll.
I'm seeing adults are role models. Need to share common experiences for processing. Be aware of compassion fatigue and secondary trauma. Needing to care for ourselves and others. We've lost connection and have to find ways for reconnection. Building community. Rituals, traditions, and patterns that we follow through the year and make space for mourning and then innovating. Making connections has been hard. The lack of face-to-face makes meaningful connection more challenging. And the need for healing due to experiences and stress. We're all working our way through the stages of grief. With distance learning, it's making connections challenging, but not impossible.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and very heartfelt comments in chat about the importance of this. And I think what we'll do now is we're going to take about 20 minutes, and in the 20-minute time, you will have an opportunity to go into the roadmap, look at critical practice 2, which is pages 19 and 28, and look and see where there are resources, how to think about preparing for doing this work. How do you implement this work? How do you sustain it if you've already started it? Explore on your own and find one tool that you'll be sharing with your team. So this is a time for you individually to go in, look through the roadmap, that critical practice 2, and find one tool that might help your team, okay? So you're going to be looking at the critical actions 1, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, or 2.4, whichever one was your identified area, the connection and healing among adults, access to mental health, innovation, anti-racist practices, professional learning. Which one you identified as your priority area, and explore that, the resources that are in that section. And also give yourself a break, and we'll come back at 12:25. So that gives us time to explore and also take a 10-minute break. Any questions about this part?
So before we dive back into looking at critical practice 2, we want to just invite you to breathe for a moment. You may have been rushing around doing some other things during your break in addition to your assigned reading. And want to just remind everyone that pausing is a really important equity practice, and that when we're moving fast, we tend to revert back to biases that are sometimes very deeply held that we're not always very aware of. But when we slow down, we can really be more self-aware, and we can center ourselves around how we're interacting with others and showing up. So we just invite you to breathe for just a moment before we jump back into our work together.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is a time when you'll be meeting with your teams if you came with an organization. If not, you'll be meeting with other colleagues. And the discussion is really yours. It's really your opportunity to discuss this, how critical practice shows up in your context. Suggestion might be to share one another's priority action areas, why they matter, what are we already doing. Please share tools that you found or areas that seemed particularly relevant. Look at the essential questions. The essential questions, again, really help us stay focused and not leave a lot of things to chance. So think about how the questions might help your team pay attention to what's important right now. So thank everyone for signing up and numbering yourselves. And we are going to take about 15 minutes in team right now. Share what you discovered and share a tool and listen. Really work towards equity of voice. And John, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I did the best I could at putting everyone in their rooms. I did put some people who are in rooms by themselves with another colleague, like Mary said. There's like still 6 people that haven't been assigned. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open all the rooms, get everyone going, then I'll ask those 6 people where you want me to put you, and I can put you there. And if you feel like you're in a room that I put you in the wrong place, when you get in a breakout room, just if you click on that little question mark that says help, it'll give me a message and I can help and move you to another breakout room. So right now I'm going to open the breakout rooms. It's going to ask you to join, please join. And then I'll talk to those 6 people that have not been assigned. So we'll see you in a little bit.
A lot of us are all experiencing stress, and it may come in different ways. And I mean, we got a long list of students that are failing classes. So if a student is failing 4 classes, his name is going to appear on this list more than once. There are 3,000 Fs on this list, okay? It's excessive. And so they're asking counselors and other support staff to make calls, but I feel like we're not getting anywhere.
There's so many, as the discussion with a parent who has a child at home who's trying to deal with technology issues, it's so challenging. It's like juggling.
It's very challenging, very.
Well, Jeanette, what you're describing which is why those really paying attention to the relationships in our families and with our colleagues, because there's so much friction now, places that are not working and slowing it down and resisting, that just over and over again, I have to remind myself to pay attention to relationships that I thought were pretty solid, but kind of have been coasting on them. And now I really have to, can't take it for granted.
Exactly. So I'm part of a parent chat group. And this morning, all parents were required to stop by the school site at 9 a.m. And the chat just started going crazy because they're saying, what in the world, I work?
Yeah.
And the parents were just irritated. And it was one after the other after the other. Thankfully, I have my mom at home, so she went to go get them. and my work can be flexible, you know, so I
Yeah.
have that flexibility. But in the chat, it was evident that no one else could do that.
Yeah.
And they were so frustrated. They were frustrated. Parents were frustrated. Some of the caregivers were frustrated that are part of the conversation. It was nerve-wracking to watch. I got stressed out for them, and it didn't affect me at all. You know, just because I wanted to tell my mom, can you pick them all up and just drive them, go drop them off? But I didn't. Yeah, it's a hassle.
Well, I'm also thinking of that word cloud, which we want to save and use it when we come back next time. Is that piece around communication is we just cannot overestimate it. You know, it's just the glue that's holding everything together right now. Which is why I thought the poll was so powerful, that it's really around connection. It's around the healing piece and connecting, and which is interesting because that isn't a line item budget. You know, it's not, it doesn't cost money to do that. It's about our intention and allocation of time. That's the big resource right now, is time. And technology that works. We hope that you got the conversation going. Just know also, when this session closes, we are keeping the breakout rooms open, so you can go back in with your team if you have conversations you'd like to finish up. Take a minute now. Anything come up about your discussion, what your questions are, what you're wondering about, what your direction you're thinking of going in? Chat in your ahas. If you'd like to speak up, just type in an H in chat and we can call on you. What's emerging in your school or your district around this idea of connecting and healing and caring for the adults?
Need to find ways to allow teachers to come together and de-stress. Stress is at an all-time high. Many teachers have dealt with traumatic experiences with students and need support. Need to find creative ways to take care of ourselves.
And again, these are things that we can't leave to chance. We really have to be intentional about it. And I was sharing that right now, time is our most precious resource. So allocating time for this and to address the healing as a community and not as an individual problem that you're trying to solve.
I appreciate someone wrote that it's about time the educational system took into consideration the emotional aspect of learning.
Yeah.
Parents to be part of the school community so we can have their support also.
Keep chatting. We're gonna take a moment to reflect on what we've done today. We took a look at a framework for adult SEL around learning, collaborating, and modeling. We saw how critical relational trust is to this whole endeavor. You can have all the resources in the world, but if there's not relational trust,
it's really difficult to make them all work. We had an opportunity to just to dip into the SEL Roadmap to see what's there. A few minutes with your team, what might be some implications. And again, there will be time at the close where the breakout rooms are open. Jennifer, I think.
So we're going to take a moment to do reflection. And we want all of you to think about what is going to be most important for you to remember from today, and think about why that thing matters. So we're going to give you a minute to think about that. What is one thing or a theme that is most important for you to remember from today and why it matters? So think about that for a moment, and then we want you to put that in the chat so we can see what people are reflecting on from what we talked about. A few comments coming in about the importance of being intentional in the work. That we're human. The importance of self-awareness and self-care. It starts with ourselves. Needing to set aside time for connection, also connected to the intentionality. Stepping back when we have to, pausing. The importance of modeling and practicing. Just the basic stop and breathe. Even though there's so much to do, we have to take the time for our self-care and model and lead with intent and purpose. That's kind of a good summary of what a lot of the comments are saying. So, as Mary said in the very beginning, your feedback is exceptionally important to us. We make adjustments in between each of these sessions based on what you are telling us has worked or not worked so well for you. So we're putting a link in the chat, and you can also, if it works, to click on the feedback word on the screen, but it will also be put in the chat, I believe. If you could go in and fill out the feedback form, we would really, really appreciate it. It's a very important information for us. And also just a reminder while you're logging into that we have one more session coming up in early October for which we're going to use this information. And we'll go over in a little bit what will be included then. So we're just going to give you a minute or two to fill out that form so we can be sure you have the time to do it while it's fresh in your mind, and we'll come back in a moment. And don't go anywhere because we have a couple of announcements. So I'm going to hand it over to Kiana from Imperial County Office of Ed to talk a little bit about some of the resources that they have coming up that they want to be sure all of you know about. And then when we're through this, we'll come back and remind you about the opportunity for some team time when we're done. So Kiana.
Yes, just a couple of things coming up from the SEL team and with other partnerships that we have with different county offices. You may have seen already, but we absolutely invite elementary school teachers to our Art Start series. The visual and performing arts are very connected to the social and emotional learning competencies. And that is the angle that our friend Ms. Higgins from Riverside is taking with each of those topics. So the SEL one has already happened, but we have the recording, and coming along is expression and communication through poetry, the culturally responsiveness and the arts, and then finally a close look at the new art standards. For administrators, I put the link in the chat. We have 2 sessions with our friend Dr. Woodruff. He comes from San Joaquin County Office of Education and has been supporting our ICOE curriculum team with our personal self-care and stress management. So that one is specifically for administrators. Our first session is on Monday. It's just a power hour, a soulful power hour for self-care, and also thinking about some other supports we might put in place as things move back to face-to-face. And then the last thing on the next slide is just our health education framework rollout. There are several content areas in the health education world, and one of those content areas is social and emotional learning. So the actual standards for SEL live in health as well as the arts. So this is open to classroom teachers, administrators, counselors, nurses, especially for the kickoff. So you can see the big picture of the 2019 health education framework, very connected to social and emotional learning. So that's what's coming up in the near future, connected to SEL in Imperial County, and we hope to see you and your teachers there.
Thanks, Kiana. So our next session is on October 5th, and we're going to really focus time in that session on planning and using the SEL Roadmap as a guide and a tool for that. So we're excited to see all of you back then. It's been an honor to be with you again. And what we're going to do now is open up breakout rooms that will be available for the next half an hour or so for your teams, and hopefully you have set aside some time to do some additional debriefing and reflecting and planning with your team. Also, all of us who were co-hosts are going to remain in this main room for 10 minutes or so in case anybody wants to hang around and talk or ask questions. So we'll be here for at least another 10 minutes or so as a resource for you should you need it. So thank you again for being with us, and thank you to our friends from San Bernardino and Imperial counties. And we will look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll just say that bit.ly link is for the entire series, so that'll continue to work as we add things in it. So everything from session 1 is in that link.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.